The Jews in Israel are slaughtered without provocation. We all know it. The whole world knows it now. We've got the videos. We've got the phone conversations. We know all about what took place. We have the plans, the blueprints, everything. And the goal was to do exactly what they did. Slaughter, slaughter in the most inhumane, I won't say animals, because they're not animals. They're worse than animals. In the most subhuman way imaginable. But I want to start with a member of NATO, Turkey. Erdogan is an Islamist. An Islamist is a fundamentalist Muslim. Not all Muslims are fundamentalists. We know several who are not. Zuhdi Jasser is a good man. He served in the United States Navy. His family escaped the Middle East. He's a Muslim. They went through Reformation, as do most faiths. Enes Freedom, who I will be interviewing this weekend on Fox. He's another Muslim, and he is from Turkey. His family's still there, and Erdogan has marked him for death. He wants him to be extradited to Turkey from the United States, and of course we're not going to do that. And what you see here in this Erdogan is a guy who destroyed the civil society in Turkey. It was a secular society. It was actually a very free and democratic country. Ataturk was the one who set up the system, who was a tremendous leader for Turkey. Erdogan came in, and he was always part of this radical Islamist party. And they always managed to weasel their way in, and then they never lose elections. This last election, a few months back, he was challenged by a very potent challenger. All the opposition parties and elements got behind this guy. And somehow he lost. Can you imagine? They had a runoff and he lost. That's because Erdogan is more Vladimir Putin each and every day that goes by. He also has been giving aid and comfort as well as a safe haven to several of the Hamas Nazi leaders. Qatar and Turkey have done that. Can you imagine that? And this is a country we sell military equipment to, including F-16s. Because he's part of NATO. But he's very close to Russia. He's very close to Putin. He's always been undermining and attacking Israel, you might recall. He even pulled his ambassador. He claims to be supporting the Palestinians, but he won't take any Palestinians out of Gaza either. Not a single Arab country will take a single Palestinian. Why is that? Is it because they know the whole culture? Probably so, considering that the Palestinians in Jordan, which was at one time 70% Palestinian, tried to overthrow the king there, his father. The Hashemite monarchy, which was created by the Ottoman Empire a little over 100 years ago. That's how far their history goes, 100 years. And then, of course, when Israel was fighting for its freedom, the Jews were in 1948. What was called Transjordan at the time was created by the Ottoman Empire, as I said. They stole Judea and Samaria from the Jews. They called it the West Bank of Jordan. Now every moron in America calls it the West Bank. Even people do it unwittingly. All the media do it. They will never call it Judea and Samaria. So when the Jews go back into their homeland as the indigenous peoples, and they try to build homes and little villages and communities, they're called settlers. And these so-called settlers are said to be taking and occupying land that belongs to the Palestinians. When the Ottoman Empire was on its last leg, was a very powerful empire, and it controlled all the Middle East pretty much. Near the end, it conveyed much of that land to the British and others, and it said that basically 1/3 to 40% of the land would be conveyed to the Jews who were there originally. And so after 2,000 years of being exiled from their homeland, Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, all these areas, many Jews came back, especially after the Holocaust. Well, the Palestinians were Bedouins, Arabs, and they changed their name under Yasser Arafat to Palestinians, because obviously they're not people of Palestine. And so Jordan had this civil war between the Arabs and these people who identified themselves as Palestinians. And they almost overthrew the Jordanian monarchy. That's why the king's son, King Abdallah, does not want any more Palestinians in his kingdom. It's now about 50%, quote unquote, Palestinian. He doesn't want another single one in his country. Egypt doesn't want a single one. Even in the Sinai Peninsula, which is basically unpopulated, it's a large swath of desert, they don't want anything to do with it. That's why they kept that passway shut. Remember, the Gaza Strip has two borders, one with Israel and one with Egypt. And in 1967, the Israelis conquered that area as they defeated their enemies that surrounded them, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the rest. And so they took Saudi Arabia, they took the Sinai Peninsula, they took the Gaza Strip, and so forth. And they didn't want to keep them. They only wanted to keep those areas that were crucial to their self-defense because they could never be sure who's going to attack them or when. So eventually they gave the Sinai Peninsula back, Sadat and Begin meeting, you might recall. And they didn't really want the Gaza Strip, but Egypt didn't want it either. And it wasn't populated with quote-unquote Palestinians. It was mostly populated with Jews at that point. And so in 2005, Sharon, General Sharon, then Prime Minister Sharon, decided, you know what, let's do a test case here. And he forcibly removed the Jewish settlers, who were settlers in that part of the Middle East. It was terrible. They removed tens of thousands of people. And they said to the Palestinians, okay, here you go. Let's give this two-state solution a try. Fatah, which is headed by the Palestinian Authority, which was once headed by Arafat, was headed by Abbas. Abbas, of course, murdered his way to the top of the so-called Palestinian Authority because, you know, he's a moderate. So Erdogan has destroyed the civil society in Turkey. He's built a massive palace for himself and to himself, which is said to be nearly 100,000 square feet. It's a palace. He built this massive mosque where now the faith, or at least his practice of the faith, has replaced the civil society. So he's a fundamentalist. And as I said, he gives aid and comfort, support, money, and safe harbor to some of the most ruthless leaders of the Hamas Nazi terrorist movement. So here he is, the Telegraph, we give a hat tip to them. Here he is saying Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Here he is saying it to his own parliament, which is much like the Communist Chinese parliament. It's massive and filled with a bunch of, lapdogs and sycophants. Go.
Ve Hamas bir terör örgütü değil, topraklarını ve vatandaşlarını koruma mücadelesi veren, evet, bir kurtuluş ve bir mücahitler grubu. Değerli kardeşlerim, tabii iyi niyetimiz vardı ama iyi niyetimizi suistimal etti. İsrail'e gitme projemiz vardı, iptal. Eğer iyi niyetle devam etmiş olsaydı münasebetlerimiz farklı olabilirdi. Ama şimdi maalesef o da olmayacak. Çünkü iyi niyetimizi de bunlar suistimal ettiler. Her ne kadar onlar, ey İsrail, sen bir örgüt olabilirsin. Çünkü bu Batı'nın sana borcu çok. Ama Türkiye'nin sana borcu yok.
There you go. So, the Jews in Israel are slaughtered without provocation. We all know it. The whole world knows it now. We've got the videos. We've got the phone conversations. We know all about what took place. We have the plans, the blueprints, everything. And the goal was to do exactly what they did. Slaughter in the most inhumane, I won't say animals, because they're not animals. They're worse than animals, in the most subhuman way imaginable. And as I said before, whereas the Nazis tried to cover up near the end of World War II what they had been doing to the Jews, Hamas was broadcasting it. You have that one case where one of their terrorists called his father, excited and proudly, said he killed 10 Jews with his own hands. With his own bare hands, including a husband and a wife. And the information that's coming out about the rape, about the brutalization, about burning people alive, about cutting off their limbs, cutting off their breasts, the rapes that result in young girls breaking their pelvis bones, and who the hell knows what else. The disembowelment of human beings alive, the tying of a mother to her baby, her young child, with iron wire, and then burning them both alive so that their bodies are fused together. These forensic medical examiners say that what they see here is just so unimaginable. And imagine what they see. And one of them was at 9/11. It spent months there and said it doesn't even come close to what took place. Because 9/11 was horrific. People burned to death. They jumped to their death. Sickening. But here, you have unleashed these subhuman bastards. And what they're taught at a young age is that Jews are not human. They dehumanize other human beings. And it goes on and on and on. They do to human beings what you wouldn't do to a rat. What you wouldn't do to a rat. And if they hadn't been stopped by the IDF several hours later, just imagine if there was no IDF and these butchers and these genocidal maniacs were free to roam through the country. This is what they would do to everybody. It is the law of the jungle, except there's no law. And for Erdogan, who knows all this, to say what he said, as if Israel is the perpetrator as opposed to the victim, is disgusting. And this guy's a member of NATO. And it's happening all over the world. It's happening in our Congress. It's happening in our newsrooms. It's happening in our colleges and universities. You can see Jews, or just people supporting Jews, are now being beaten in the streets.
Want to see more? Sign up for Levin TV.